What's up guys, MikeCoco back here, bringing you guys a new video on the new costumes of the month for November. This month we have 5 new costumes. One of them is for the Mythic Season Hero and 4 of the others are for the non-Mythic Season Heroes. So starting off with the non-Mythic Season Heroes, we have Asus, which is the first hero with a new costume. His costume adds a unique skill actually. It reduces the damage done to magic heroes by 20% for 3 turns. Now this 20% I believe is constant, it remains static despite the level of your Asus, and you can see here that the 3 turns indicated here is not colored in any kind of color, meaning that it doesn't matter if your Asus is level 1 or 100, it will always be a 3 turn reduction. It will not increase and it won't be any less than that. And the reason why I say this is because I have a level 50 Asus with a level 1 skill, which is this one, and then I have a level 50 Asus with a level 50 skill, and the reduction is the same. So I'm inclined to believe that the damage reduction remains constant. So for just the skill itself, it's actually quite unique and it's actually pretty useful. Magic heroes are typically not that great at tanking, so any kind of damage reduction is good for them. However, there are a few problems with Asus' skill, and the first problem is actually not that significant. It's just the fact that it requires 300 Fury in order to initialize the skill, but it lasts for 3 turns, which means that you don't necessarily have to use Asus' skill until 3 turns after, which is good because 300 Fury is a lot of Fury. It's at 1/5 of your Fury pool, so a good thing is that you don't have to activate it every turn. Now the second problem, which is the much larger problem, the one with more concern, is the fact that we're using a magic hero to reduce the damage done to magic heroes, and that seems kind of weird, at least for me, because magic heroes are, like I said before, they're not great at tanking, so we're using a not that great at tanking hero to help reduce damage for other not that great at tanking heroes. So it's like using, I can't think of a good metaphor actually, but it just seems odd. We're using a hero that can die very easily to help reduce damage for other heroes that die easily, because there's no guarantee that Asus will be able to even last that long in a battle to be able to use a skill and have it be effective in battle, because Asus could just die on the second turn and you would never figure out, even though he is protected by his own skill because he is a magic hero. Now if this skill was incorporated to a melee user or even a ranged user that has better HP and more defense, I could see it being useful, but because magic heroes are so terrible at tanking, the fact that you have to rely on Asus to make use of his skill is kind of not that great, because like I said before, it's very easy and it's very possible that Asus will die within the first few turns. So that's why his skill can be quite inconsistent in that sense. So despite the fact that the skill is good, in practice I don't think it will work. So that's just my take on it. Now the second hero is Kuroko, and she's a S2 hero. She gets a 20% buff because she is of a lower season, and her skill changes to a skill similar to Ridderin, which we saw last month, and it increases the critical damage by 0.2% per level for sword heroes. So at level 100, it's going to be a 20% increase in critical damage. And the problem I find with Kuroko's skill is that it can only be applied to sword heroes. Now, Ridderin's skill, it was better because you could buff multiple allies that are not specifically sword heroes. You could buff any hero within Ridderin's row. Now, Kuroko's skill is much more limited. It's much more specific, excuse me. So you don't have that much freedom. And for free players, the hardest hitting heroes are actually not sword heroes, but ranged users like Pram or Lasida or Dark Avenger Sarah. And so you would actually want the critical damage buff to be applied to those heroes rather than sword heroes. And you can't do that with Kuroko's skill, but you can with Ridderin's. And furthermore, her Fury cost is 300 Fury. So it's like, why would you get Kuroko's costume when Ridderin basically does her job better in every single way? It's a better skill, it costs less Fury, and it's more versatile. So Kuroko's costume is not that good. I would stay away from it. Even if you don't have Ridderin, it's just not a good idea. Now, the last two heroes are pretty good. So the first one, which is Serisa, is more of the PvE hero of the month, because her skill changes to a shield in a row and an attack buff by 20%. So in many ways, she's actually very similar to Denari. Denari previously was able to buff crits, I think for 2 turns for each row, and back in the first year of release of Legion, Denari was the best support hero because the crit buff allowed your heroes to do a lot of damage. And in many ways, Serisa does that exact same thing, albeit not for 2 turns. But in exchange, her Fury cost is lowered to 100 Fury rather than 200 compared to Denari. So a 20% attack buff for 100 Fury is a very good trade. I highly recommend people to get Serisa's costume for this, because you're giving up 100 Fury for 20% increase in attack, and if you're running a 4 formation, that's 4 heroes that have 20% increase in attack. Now, because my Serisa is leveled, it's going to be 20% at level 100, but at each level it's a 0.2% increase in attack. And not only do you get an attack buff, you also get a shield. So just in case, Lucas' shield is not enough, you can add another shield. It might hinder your Fury gain, but honestly, the 20% attack buff is just what I really want to emphasize. It's a very good trade, and I highly recommend people to get Serisa's costume if you're very into PvE. For things like Mythic Raid and Tower, Serisa's costume is definitely very good. Explorer, she might not be that useful because you're limited to 5 heroes, but she could be decent in another team, a secondary team. So that's my take on Serisa. Definitely worth getting. She's been buffed a lot with her costume. Now, the last free costume is Yukio's costume, and her skill changes to a chance stun in 3x3, and I believe from what the skill describes, it is a guaranteed delayed dot now instead of a chance delayed dot like previously. And it also reduces her Fury by 50% for 2 turns, so that's actually 150 Fury for her skill, and it remains for 2 turns, meaning that you don't have to keep reapplying her skill to ensure that the Fury cost stays down. Now, this is very good for PvP because Yukio has a very good mythic skill. Her myth skill, I think it reduces damage done to her in PvP, and she is immune to critical hits for a certain number of turns, which is very good in PvP. Plus the fact that she can chance stun in a 3x3 area and only cost 150 Fury, and potentially be a guaranteed delayed dot after 2 turns, which is roughly 2 times of her damage. That's a very good skill. Now, of course, she does share her problems with Asus because of course, it costs 300 Fury to initialize her skill at first, but then later it only costs 150 Fury, which is far less than 300 each turn. So Yukio is definitely a great PvP hero if you have her costume. The costume just makes her that much better. So I would definitely go for Yukio if you're into PvP. Now, the last costume is Dread Queen Karina's costume, and it changes her skill a little bit. So her delayed dot becomes non-dispellable. So people like Remy, Ione with costume, and Tanui, Celine, you won't be able to remove the delayed dot that Dread Queen Karina applies if you have her costume, because it's non-removable. And she also increases the critical damage by 0.5%, and I believe that is for per level. So at level 100, that will be a 50% increase in critical damage. And if you add that with the base critical damage of sword heroes, that's 250 critical damage, meaning that all her crits deal 2.5 times more damage versus 2 times damage without her costume. And because her costume guarantees the next hit will be a critical hit, similar to how Anak has her skill, this is essentially a 50% attack buff. You can think of it that way, as long as the critical hit buff is not removed by someone like Jiri with costume, or Tehu, or Remy with costume. So it's essentially a 50% attack buff. And the non-removable delayed dot, I'm wondering if it's working as like Tehu and Sarah in Mythic Raid. In Mythic Raid, you can't remove those skills with the ones I mentioned before, Ione, Remy, Celine, but you can block it using Gwyn. So I'm wondering I feel like Gwyn also will be able to counter this, but you have to kind of anticipate that Red Queen Karina will use a skill on a specific hero, and you have to initialize Gwyn's skill beforehand, and that kind of anticipation in PvP is actually very difficult. So even then, I think we can pretty much consider this as a permanently non-dispellable delayed dot for now, as of the heroes up to like season 8. So in that sense, Dread Queen Karina is a very powerful hero. So in summary, if you want to have increased damage for all of your heroes, I would definitely go with Serisa because she can buff multiple rows. If you're into PvP, I would go with Yukio, and if you want to focus on just a specific hero, I would go with Dread Queen Karina because it's a 50% increase in damage and a non-removable delayed dot, which is fantastic. So that's pretty much it for the November costumes of the month, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.